best things about audio books that I discovered personally with writing for it is that the first person narrative is a great way to kind of talk to your listener there. The moment it becomes a third person narrative, there is always a distance that comes between the story and the listener. But a first person narrative works wonderfully, which has been my experience. Despite everything that we go through, that we are alive, is a reason to celebrate. And that is a reason for us to hope that things will change. Okay, so I try and work that into every piece of writing I do. It can be the most hopeless kind of situation, but somehow I also try and give my characters an opportunity to redeem themselves and redeem their lives. There are a lot of problems that make women have to take an inferior position in life, but the solution to that isn't turning into a man-hater or trying to be like a man. It's just about being comfortable as a woman and achieving the most you can as a woman. Men are different and women are different. Every woman should believe that she is fine as who she is and make the most of everything that life has, dealt her, and not kind of allow herself to become a victim. Tomorrow's a new day, so get out of that.
Today on Expressions, we are with one of India's most original literary voices, Anita Nair. A novelist who refuses to follow trends, she has carved a creative universe entirely her own. From globally celebrated fiction and award-winning screenplays to groundbreaking crime thrillers and children's literature. With stories translated into more than 31 languages, a writing process rooted in fierce authenticity, and a career shaped by courage, curiosity, and deep observation, Anita Nair continues to redefine what it means to be a contemporary Indian storyteller.
Hi, welcome to Expressions. I'm Neha. Today I have Anita Nair with me. I'm very excited to know about her journey. So let's get to the chat. Hi, Anita. Thank you for joining. I want to start, through this podcast, we would really like to know about you and about the writer, Anita Nair. So to start things off, what is the one thing about you that would surprise people?
Thanks, Neha, for having me here.
Thank you.
I think the one thing that would surprise people is my, let's say, great passion for music.
Okay.
It's a very serious passion. Indian classical music, so Carnatic music, Kerala branch of it called Sopanam, which is basically, music for the Kathakali plays and so on.
So can you elaborate a little more? Do you practice, sing? What is it?
Yeah, so I've always been very fascinated by music I would think anything that was kind of conservative, in the sense that anything that was traditional. Conservative is a wrong word, traditional, and classical. So I did come from a family where there wasn't much interest in classical music. Everybody liked popular music and cinema and that kind of thing. But I was always kind of drawn to it. So I started studying music when I was, a teenager.
Okay.
And then had to give it up because of, college and work and everything. And then more recently, I've started learning to sing again.
Okay.
And I started from scratch because, too many years had gone past. And now it's something that is let's say, an overwhelming passion for me, as much as my writing is, except that writing is my public life and singing is my very personal life.
Wonderful. And how did your childhood nurture your relationship with reading?
I came from a family where they read a lot.
Yeah.
So one of my earliest memories is of my parents sitting in these matching green colored armchairs, each with a book in their hand. And my older brother also sitting with a book. And I remember I must have been about 2 or something. And I just was looking at 3 of them. And I said, gosh, there must be something really, fascinating and intriguing about what is between the covers of a book, because all 3 are lost in it. And I'm the only one who couldn't be included in it because I didn't know how to read. So I actually kind of was in a tearing hurry to start learning to read and write, just so that I could be part of that, that group.
Yeah.
And then once, of course, I started reading, then I was a voracious reader. And because I had an older brother, I read everything that he did as well. So my reading was pretty advanced for my age. And to this day, and I know that feeling when I open a book and I allow myself to disappear into it. And that is like the happiest place for me to be in.
Yeah, wonderful. So did your mom and dad read to you when you were young?
Not really. My mom did tell me a lot of stories. And like I said, I was in a tearing hurry to start reading. So I was reading by the time I was 4. So until then, she would tell me stories which is drawn from mythology and folk tales and all of it. And some of it she made up because she ran out of stories after a point. So she started making up. And so I think stories were there. Initially they began as, oral storytelling, and it just moved. The moment I could start reading, then I started, devouring stories on my own.
And how did college shape your journey to become a professional writer?
So my, let's say, my stint at education after school was quite dismal. My parents moved from Chennai to Kerala. My mother actually moved, and I had to move with her.
Yeah.
And because of that, I went to a provincial college in Kerala in a place called Ottapalam, which is a fantastic college for people who are seeking, like planning to do their economics and science and commerce and all of that. But not essentially a great place for English literature, which is what I chose to do. And also the time that I was studying there, it was the peak time of all the strikes that could happen, hartals that could happen in Kerala. Every day there was a hartal of some sort, so a band of some sort. So there would be like the bus drivers band, then there would be all the student unions calling for an agitation. Then when that would clear up, there would be probably a strike at the university and stuff like that. So after about 2 years of feeling that I was getting nowhere, I dropped out of college. So that's pretty much my education. So I don't think college really had any, great influence on who I am as a writer.
And what role have libraries played in your life?
Oh, very crucial, I think. So one of the things was, of course, that in the schools that I studied in, especially the school that I went to until my 10th standard, we had a fantastic library there. And the neighborhood I lived in, there was a club there which also had a splendid library. So I've always kind of, I would think, haunted these places. And the moment I was a little older and I could access the British Council Library and the USIS Library in Chennai, I could, when I was there borrowing books and stuff like that. So I think in many ways, everything that I learned came from the libraries and not as much from institutions, educational institutions. Yes, the libraries were contained within these educational institutions, but I learned everything from books and reading.
Where do you get your ideas for your story? Where does it begin?
I think it's like I'm telling stories in my head. Everything I see kind of like is the beginning for a story. For me, I can walk into a room, look at a piece of furniture there that is a little, out of the ordinary. And immediately I'm like creating a character who would be living in that space or inhabiting that space. So I think for me, ideas just come from observation, begins with observation. And obviously there are a lot of abstract concepts that I'm trying to understand, and which is something that most of us do. We're trying to understand things, and the way I understand it is by telling a story. So I need to create a story to be able to explore that concept from all dimensions, and then eventually it becomes like a proper full let's say, a fully developed story.
And what does your writing process look like? I know that I was researching, and I know that you still stick to long form writing. And so, what is it like? Are there multiple drafts, long pauses, sudden bursts of activity? And how long does it take to write a book?
Okay, so for me, before I even actually start writing a book, so I have my set pens, like I have a certain pen that I use to write literary fiction. I have a pen that I use to write children's fiction, and I have a pen that I use to write crime. Plus, there are 3 different pens. So that automatically, the moment I take that pen, then it's like the algorithm changes in my head. So before I start writing, I need to get a proper notebook to write in. And I like these, A4 size notebooks that I think the 5 subject ones, because they're nice and thick. And they also used to, at least they have like a thick cardboard cover, which allows me to write properly on it. And I need to touch and feel and everything. And then only once I think sensually that I'm satisfied with the feel of the paper will I start writing. And so my process is kind of simple in the sense that I use a fountain pen. I don't use ballpoints or, any other kind of pens. So fill the ink in the morning. I'm a very early riser. So I get up very early in the morning, fill the pen with ink, write till the ink runs dry, which is usually about 1,000 words or so. And then it's done for the day. But that's just the actual act of writing. So before that, I need to have spent some time planning what I'm actually writing.
Yeah.
So when I write, it just kind of pours out like a, torrent more than anything else. And because I'm writing longhand, I'm careful. So it's not like, it's not like on the computer where I can do a cut and paste and, do all those things. So that's my first draft. And then it's keyed in, and that becomes my second draft. And the third draft is when I, take one final look at it and I send it out. So that 3 drafts is what I go through.
Yeah. But you're pretty traditional with ink and with...
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't be able to write. I mean, I can write on the computer, on the phone, everything. But when I do my fiction, I like to write longhand. So much so I have a callus in my hand, like a proper kind of callus because of the writing.
Yeah.
And the bone is a little kind of protruded here. Constant pressure of the pen.
Yeah. So audiobooks are very common these days. Do you feel it's an effective way to ingest a story?
Yes, if it is written for the audio medium. I am not so sure that novels that are read as audiobooks really are as effective. I think one of the best things about audio books that I discovered personally with writing for it is that the first person narrative is a great way to kind of talk to your, listener there. The moment it becomes a third person narrative, there is always a distance that, comes between the story and the listener.
Okay.
But a first person narrative works wonderfully, which has been my experience. And it's also a very different way of writing.
Yeah.
Because you can't really let the pace flag. You can't fill it with too many characters and all of that because the listener doesn't have the luxury of going back and, it's not like flipping a page and saying, who is this character now? When you're reading, you need to be part of the, the process.
Yeah.
So it's a very challenging but very interesting form.
Yeah. So we also wanted to ask, do you prefer traditional books or e-books for your own reading? How do you do that?
I do both. I read, see the thing when I have books that have about 800, 900 pages, lugging them around becomes difficult. So what I do is I download those books on my Kindle, or if I'm traveling, I take my Kindle with me because one book is never going to be sufficient. And I don't want to pay excess baggage. So I end up taking my Kindle, I download 4 or 5 books in it and I take it with me. So it's again a mixture of both. I read the physical book as much as I read ebooks.
Okay. So when you're traveling, it's ebooks and physical when you're home, I guess. You've written a lot of books for children too. So this question, just to take your opinion about the latest issue, which is the rise of YouTube and social media that we see. And it's resulted in a rise of a lot of young people wanting to be on YouTube and social media. So is there something that you, as a public figure, wish that teenagers understood what it means to put yourself out there?
Yes, two things that I do think of is one is the undue pressure they're putting on themselves to be exciting and interesting. And, it's like living life in the fast lane. You're all the time performing.
Yeah.
You're never being yourself. And ultimately, that is going to take its toll. It's going to rob you of just the sheer joy of being alive. And nothing is, I think, remembered unless it's on social media for this age group, and that worries me again because what you realize after a few years of being alive is that nothing is permanent, right? Everything is going to change, and this trend is going to change into something else, where probably the medium is going to become even more competitive. And which means the pressure that these young people put on themselves is just going to grow. So that's one part of it that worries me. And second thing, of course, is that because you're trying to bring in as many followers you can to your page and, become this well-known influencer, whatever.
Digital influencer.
You end up celebrating mediocrity. You take the most mediocre things and make a hoo-ha around it.
Yeah.
And it's just about how things are being presented. And that worries me because, it's like the lowest common denominator is what is going to appeal to the wide audience.
Sure.
And so you're automatically dropping your standards. So in that sense, yes. It's a great medium, but it needs to be used judiciously.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Very well said. So through Anita's Attic, you mentor new writers. Can you tell us a little more about it?
Yeah, so I started Anita's Attic about 10 years ago. It was a result of countless requests coming to me from various writers asking if I could read their manuscript, guide them, direct them. I don't have the time to do that really. So I said, a friend of mine and I were talking about it, and they run a digital company. And so he said, how about we set up something which would, where you can mentor writers? And I said, yes, but it has to be like a really small group because when I mentor somebody, it means it's a hands-on kind of, experience that the both of us have to go through. And which means I need that much of time with everybody. So for the last 10 years, I ran Anita's Attic first as an offline course and then as an online course post-pandemic. We've done 13 seasons so far. About 150 writers have, been mentored by me. And at least about 10 to 15 of them have published their books or had their books published, stories published in prestigious journals and stuff like that. So it's very satisfying for me.
I was just going to ask you that.
Yeah, so I've now taken it to another step where I've turned it into a fully online course.
Okay.
Where anybody, because what happens is with the very, let's say, the advanced course that I run, I expect certain, let's say, criterion to be fulfilled for them to be picked, for the course. But then there are so many other writers who still need to figure out what is it that they need to do. So I thought, let's start off with a foundation course. So I have this foundation course available online now. It's part of Anita's Attic. And it's accessible via learning.anitasattic.com. It's a pre-structured course with modules. So anybody who enrolls, anybody who feels they can write can enroll. There are no tests, there are nothing, and they can go and go through that whole program. At the end of it, if they feel that they need to know more, then they can apply for the the mentorship program I run.
Nice. It's all streamlined and
Yeah.
well organized, looks
Yeah.
like. So your research often takes you into uncomfortable, intense spaces, crowded markets, mortuaries, and even railway stations. So how do you emotionally detach yourself when you're writing about such heavy realities?
I can't. I'm actually, when I'm writing, I'm so deeply entrenched in that world that at the end of it, after finishing, and I love it to, I just try and sustain that feeling, because unless I don't feel a rawness of that emotion, the writing is not going to be powerful. So I have to live with that alternate life in my head, which is so, when I finish writing a book, that I'm like hollowed out, emptied out, for let's say a couple of months. I have no conversation. I have nothing to say to anybody. It's like no feelings about anything, because everything that I've had has gone into that book. And then I need to recover again and, find my, excuse me, find my, let's say, um, calm. And only then can I actually consider another book.
Well, that must be quite intense.
It is. It's a very, and sometimes there are times I ask myself, why do I do this to myself, But then it's also the happiest I am. So it's like pleasure and pain at the same time.
Also, you've immersed yourself deeply into real painful worlds like child trafficking, marginalized lives, women trapped by circumstance. So often through, with your research that you do. And how do you carry hope out of these encounters without softening the truth or betraying the people whose stories you're telling?
So I think one of the mottos of my life is that it's never too late to hope. Okay, that no matter what, you have to kind of, when you go to sleep and you wake up, you have to just tell yourself it's a new day, things can change. And it's something that I have clung to in my life. I mean, despite whatever troubles I may have had, I may not have had, massive life-changing troubles, but there are enough troubles in my life as well, like everybody else's. And there are times when I am completely dejected and I think that, oh God, how do I go on? What do I do with my life? What do I do with myself, etc.? And then there is this thing that when I go to bed and I tell myself, but maybe things will be different the next day. And this is how I try and survive the intensity of the worlds that I research, the intensity of the characters whose skins I slip into. Otherwise I'd be a basket case. So I need to tell myself at the end of, and I think also that, structuring my life in such a way that when I'm at home and I kind of make some time for myself where I'm with my plants or with my dogs, those are things that kind of just nurture the child in me, and that child can hope that there's always going to be a better day.
Yeah.
So that is how I kind of...
Then how does hope sit in your writing?
Oh, yes. In fact, I would think that in every piece of writing that I have done, one of the things that I've always tried to weave in without, I mean, it's maybe unconsciously done. And in retrospect, when I look at it, I see that, yes, there is this prevailing kind of thread that goes through, and which is basically that despite everything that we go through, that we are alive, is a reason to celebrate, and that is a reason for us to hope that things will change. Okay, so I try and work that into every piece of writing I do. It can be the most hopeless kind of situation, but somehow I also try and give my characters an opportunity to redeem themselves and redeem their lives.
Also, your novels don't offer easy answers or moral resolutions, so they ask the reader to sit with discomfort. Did you always know that fiction, not journalism, activism, or explanation, was the only language that could hold the kind of suffering and complexity you wanted to explore?
Yes. One of my dreams or ambitions as a child was to become a journalist. Okay, so that was the thing. Except that, given how, how off...
And you started off with the advertising world also.
Yeah, and how off route I went off education. There was no way I could have joined advertising. I mean, journalism. And then advertising was one occupation which didn't ask for degrees. And it basically, you did a copy test, and if you were good enough, you got hired and so on. So I worked in advertising for about 12 years. And after which I gave it up, So then thereafter, all through, but right from the beginning, I'm talking of from the time I was a child, I knew that one thing that I wanted to do was tell stories. And I was very, very certain about that. Whether I did it as a full-time thing or whether I would do it on the side, I didn't even debate about it, because at that point I was working. So I was also writing simultaneously, probably in between, things that was happening at home or even at the workplace, maybe in the lunch hour or something, I would be working and stuff like that. I mean, writing my own stuff. So I knew that it's easier to share with the world what I want to tell it in the form of stories rather than pontificating about it or writing a news report about it. And I thought fiction is the best way to talk to the world about everything that makes me uncomfortable, and which I'm sure makes the world uncomfortable as well. The human condition is not an easy thing at all.
Yeah.
And to talk about it, I thought fiction was my best platform.
When Lessons in Forgetting was adapted for film, how did you prepare differently for the screenplay compared to writing the novel? Did you have to read or revisit or even watch to translate the story to the screen?
Not really, because see, one of the things that works to my advantage is that I think, even when I'm writing, a novel, I think of it in terms of scenes in my head. So I don't think in terms of chapters and stuff like that. It's like a set of scenes together, and then I work on it. And then when I look at it, then later I can say that, is this going to be part of chapter 1 or is it going to be divided into chapter 1 and 2? So translating or transforming rather a book into a screenplay in this case was not very difficult for me, because it was already kind of laid out like a screenplay. Then it really was about chiseling it and taking out what was unnecessary and bringing in more dialogue and that kind of thing.
With Alphabet Soup for Lovers, you chose food and romance over dark themes. So was that book a form of healing for you as a writer?
No, actually, it was very funny. What happened was that, you have the expo that happens in every 4 years, I think, in different parts of the world. During the Milan expo, they chose me as one of their, let's say, icons for the expo. And so my publisher got very excited and he was like, let's do a book, and this was about women and food. That the talk I was giving was about women and food. And in fact, I was part of a collection of stories that came from around the world. They did this tiny little book with some stories, like some 200 stories from around the world, different countries. So I think my publisher read the story and he was like, let's do a book on food. And I leave it to you. So he said, you can do what you want, but it should have food in it. That's all I want. So then I was like, what do I do? I mean, I've never been asked to write a novel, commissioned a novel really. And I was like, what do I write about? And it has to be food and stuff like that. And then it was like, so when in doubt, I always go back to the alphabet. So that's what I did. And I was like, okay, just looking at the alphabet and said, okay, let me just break it up into the food based on alphabet. And then it became very interesting and exciting for me, because it was like an architect working on it. So you're first creating the framework, and only then am I going to be bringing in. So I did the framework saying, this is food, this is how it's going to be. Now who are the characters? And so on. So it wasn't really anything about inner healing at all. It was actually a fun book for me to write.
Nice, very interesting and cool. So in Ladies Coupé, you explore women's lives within social boundaries. Do you think freedom is more about breaking out or learning to negotiate within systems?
I think freedom is mostly about learning to free oneself from the dictates of what the world tells us, and how we ought to lead our lives. So freedom for me is primarily that. The rest of it is then comes in thereafter, which means like you're talking about whether it's extraneous factors and stuff like that. But I think a lot of people in many ways might seem very free of all kinds of shackles, but within them they are so constrained. So I would think for me freedom has to begin from there. So which is again and why I wrote that book, because it was an exploration of what is really independence.
Yeah.
Is independence just being living alone, or is it just about truly feeling independent within you, saying that I can manage without anybody else's support, even if it's only emotional support.
Nice. Very relatable to everyday
Yeah.
and most people. Your crime novels, especially Chain of Custody, it deals with disturbing truths like child trafficking. What responsibility does a writer carry when turning real suffering into a fiction?
I think one of the most important things that a writer should remember when you're talking about real human suffering and that you're carrying into the pages of your book is to not sensationalize it and to not turn it into something that is going to just get people to pick up the book and read it. So which means titillating details and stuff like that. I think this was a horrendous subject to research, and it just kind of left me devastated. It took me a while to come out of that black space I had gone into, but I had to constantly tell myself that I owe it to these victims that I had spoken to. I owe it to them to make sure that I put their story out there so that people don't see. Mostly when we read about child trafficking, we read it as news reports. And typically with news reports, it's written about for about a week, everybody's talking about it, then it's forgotten because it is just seen within the context of facts and statistics and so on. But in a novel, what you can do is these facts and statistics become characters. So which means the presence that they have in the minds of the readers is much longer.
Yeah.
And so my intention with writing this specific book was to talk about child trafficking and why it still happens with such alacrity without any kind of, curbs happening on it. It's only increasing, I think. And there are, there are different socio-economic reasons for why it happens. Nevertheless, it shouldn't be happening.
So,
I used to go to the railway station, as Majestic station there, and that's where they had this Bosco, units where they would go looking different trains. They know how to identify. So I used to go with them, and we used to walk, and I'd come back, and then these children would be brought back into the unit there, and take details from them. And because I was interested, I would be talking to them.
yeah.
And I would reach home by about 4 o'clock in the evening. And then for the next 3-4 hours, I couldn't speak a word to anybody because you just feel guilty for being alive. That's it.
True. Also, the novel exposes how systems, money, and power often hide behind respectable facades. So, is money and the people who make lots of it one of the defining obsessions of our age today?
Well, not really, not just our age. I mean, if you go back, Scott Fitzgerald's Great Gatsby, that was about the rich people, and Edith Wharton, she used to write, I'm talking about 1930s, 1950s, and so on. So money and what it does to people has always kind of been part of our obsession, except that in today's time with the access to social media and visual media and everything, and people seeking, obviously the platforms seeking more content, everything is detailed. So we're reading about people's diamonds and people's, engagement rings and what footwear they wore and everything. So there's a lot of detailing that has suddenly come into play. She was carrying this bag, this Birkin and that book, and so on. It kind of becomes an obsessive thing. And I think also that the human brain is so open to suggestions that, you know, the moment you read it, the next time you see somebody else, you're reading it again. You know, so I think this obsession is also a result of the times we live in.
Very well said. From the better man to eating wasps, your stories often slow down rather than rush. Do you think modern readers have forgotten the art of patience in storytelling?
Yes, the thing is, I kind of try and write differently depending on what genre I'm writing in. So obviously the crime ones are, you know, like quick paced and things happen all the time.
Yeah.
Whereas with literary fiction, there's also a lot of time spent dwelling on what the character is feeling and how the character is going to deal with it. It's all set in the emotional landscape.
Yeah.
The mind is the, you know, one of the characters.
Yeah.
So there is a lot of attention that I have to also pay to that part of the writing. So which means that it can kind of slow down a bit. So in that sense, I think I just write depending on the genre that I'm writing.
Yeah. In The Better Man and Bipatu and A Very Big Dream, you move away from urban settings and write deeply about village life. So, what do you understand about Indian villages that you feel isn't communicated widely enough? And how did you capture the authentic flavor? What were your influences like?
Okay, so your first question that you asked me, is there something that people don't know about me? When I'm not in Bangalore, I'm in Kerala in my tiny little village there, where I'm like a hands-on person. You know, I know everything that should be done around the plot of land that we have, and, you know, right from nurturing coconut trees and getting grass cut. And I grew up with my grandmother and my grandparents had a very old-fashioned kind of a house that they lived in. So there are things that I know which my mother doesn't, you know, like what do you feed a cow, how to feed it, what to give it, how do you feed it the last thing in the night, how to make a broom, all those things that people wouldn't ever think that I know, you know. I mean, I can do all of it.
Yeah.
So I know rural life very well. Okay. And just the other day, I was talking to a friend of mine and we were talking about a very successful film. And I said why I didn't like it. And then a successful Indian film. And he said, but that's because you're not real India. And I said, you don't know what real India is. I know what real India is because I've lived it. And even now, I spend like a week every month in my village. So when I'm there, I'm there. I'm that person. And then I shed that skin and come back into Bangalore and become this person.
Well, nice to know that, huh?
Yeah.
Nice to see that side of you. What was the starting point for Mistress? Was it a character, relationship, or an idea you were wrestling with? Was it a slow burn idea, or was it like a moment of clarity?
So, yeah, Mistress had a very definite genesis story.
Yeah.
So I was working in advertising in Bangalore at that point, and this is the last few years of my advertising life where I worked as a freelancer for a small agency. And this was near the Miller Road bridge and stuff like that. So I remember coming to work one day and this building with a narrow staircase. I go up and we have a small reception area there. And I walk in and there's this man dressed in full Kathakali costume standing there. And he's making mudras and the rest of the office is standing there and giggling. You know, and I just stood there I couldn't enter because he'd filled up the space. And then I had to kind of like lean against the wall. And then he went down with full costume. And I followed him to see what was happening. That was a time when Tata Sumos had come. So this had been opened out, the back part of it. And he was taken in like you would take, you know, cattle into a truck or something like that. And they went off. So I went back up and I said, what was going on? And then they said, oh, this was I mean, you guys know, he was supposed to be a rate card. This was done by some upcountry publication who thought, and I'm talking about in late 90s, okay? And or 2000, around that time, when rate cards were still being given by advertising agencies to advertising agencies by various publications. Physical rate cards were given out, and they thought this was a nice gimmicky way of talking about the rate card that their publication was handing out. And it just kind of broke my heart because what little I knew of Kathakali at that time was that you put in at least 9 years of studying before you're allowed to even actually climb, ascend a stage. And I wasn't blaming this man for doing what he was, because I know that there are no livelihood options for him, and he had to do this because this was one way of making ends meet. But I just thought about the world we live in that allows this to happen. And then I hit it, so that was there in my head and lurking there, germinating, growing, whatever. Then Ladies Coupé came out, and Ladies Coupé was this, fabulous bestseller all over the world. And there was a point where I had to ask myself, have I really achieved artistic success? Or did I really write a good book? Or do I think I have artistic success because the world tells me? And then I had to kind of take it one step further and say that, how do you define artistic success? Do you define it by the number of cars you have, or the number of rooms in your house? Or do you define it as something that you know for yourself, where you've raised the bar? Every time you do something, you're raising the bar. So it was with that thought that I landed into the art form of Kathakali, saying that, that thing had bothered me so much that I said, let me use a performance art to talk about artistic success.
In books like Adventures of No and your retelling of myths, you play with familiar ideas in unexpected ways. So did you have fun writing it as much as we enjoyed reading it?
Oh yeah, I love writing my children's fiction because it's like, I can just stop having to be this sensible, sane person, and I can just revert to being this mad child I was. And that mad child is who writes all my children's fiction, which is why it's a very different kind of like tone to it.
Yeah. And also I read that you take inspiration from Quran stories too.
Yes, yeah.
So can you talk to us a little more?
Yeah, so that was again an interesting reason why I wrote it. So I can't remember the year 2013 or so, there was a shooting in Kenya in a mall, by a set of fundamentalist Muslims, and they then grabbed hold of everybody there who's a non-Muslim and killed them. So they would ask everybody, what's the name of Prophet's mother, and now only like a proper Muslim would know that. And then it just occurred to me that, if you were to ask somebody who is Jesus's mother, they would say Mary. Or if you were to ask within India, who's Rama's wife or who's Rama's mother or Krishna's mother, everybody would have the answers. But even within India, if you were to ask, unless it's a Muslim child, if you were to ask who is Prophet's mother, they wouldn't know that. And I said, lack of information cannot be the reason why somebody is killed. So if information is what these terrorists are looking for, let me put it out there. So then I decided to delve into the Quran and take stories out of it. And then as I was reading it, I also found very interestingly that the creation myths, whether it's the Old Testament, the Quran also, or the Quran, or even Indian mythology, some of the creation myths are the same. And that was a very heartening thing for me, that children hopefully would see that. And again, this whole desire to inculcate, certain ideas like secularism and all of that into children without rubbing their faces into it, so that was why this book.
I love the way your stories have meaning and how it germinates.
So I spend time. I tell my writers that, I never start writing overnight. It stays with me for a few years before I actually start writing.
Oh, nice. That's why the impact is so good. So in one of your latest novel, Hot Stage, what was the biggest challenge you faced while writing the book?
So the biggest challenge, of course, is that it's set in the world of illegal fights. Right. So I stumbled upon that in sheer accident. A friend of mine, I was at a party, I met somebody and we were talking and stuff like that. And we became friends. And then after a while, I know that he's a boxer and stuff like that. And I was asking him, do you still do it and stuff? And he said, no, I had to give it up. after a couple of blood clots in my head. And I said, but how blood clots? Because boxing, you don't go above a certain point, right? So he said, no, I wasn't on the real ring. I was doing illegal fights. So now that's when my eyes kind of like lit up, like bulbs. And I said, tell me more. Because having access to a friend who has been in that world and can detail it out to me was quite amazing. So for me, that was what changed the track of Hot Streets, because I'd set out to write another book. But the moment I had access to this, I said, I can't wait. I need to write about it.
Is there anything that horrified you while you were saying the...
Yes, so much of it. And then also, there's a lot of how people are found, where they're gathered, all those things, the details, tiny little details, like what does an arena look like? I mean, it's fine. We might say that you see it in the films, but it's nothing like in the films, according to my friend. And he was telling me about every little detail, the crepe bandages they tie, and, padding yourself with an extra pair of underwear and all of those things, because there are no rules, right? It's just about who wins, because a lot of money riding on it. So yeah, so it was kind of ghastly in one way, but also very exciting in the end.
Also in your book, Why I Killed My Husband and Other Such Stories, what has been the conversation around this book? I mean, with publishers, with your friends, with co-writers, anything interesting?
Yeah, so the thing is, the title, of course, is something that makes everybody want to look at it. But again, the title is just let's say, the tip of the iceberg. Because what I've tried to do with this book is I have explored everything that India has gone through, not all of it, but many things that India has had to go through in the last 10 years. So it's a decade of this very tumultuous time we've had in the last decade, ranging from economic policy decisions to digital scams to pandemic lockdowns and various things, So I've taken about 6 or 7 ideas and woven stories. So I use political decisions that impact personal lives. So, for instance, the CAA agitation or the demonetization, all of it finds its place in this book. But I thought I wouldn't do it like, just building a story around No, that wasn't the idea. The idea is to just take a proper narrative, and within that, the narrative of personal lives, weave in what politics can do to impact it. So it's what I would call state of the nation stories.
Yeah, and you've made it very interesting rather than, talking about these things which would sound very boring.
Boring, yeah. And very kind of like, like an economics test paper. So rather than that, I wanted to kind of, because it's not just economics, it's also about reservation. And so what happens to these children who go into professional colleges on a reservation quota? How are they treated? We never talk about that. So there were many things that I wanted to talk about through the guise of fiction.
What does your family think of your books? Do they?
My family don't really read my work. I guess they can't reconcile the image of me as the person with the writer that I am. So yeah. I mean, on and off, they do read something, but it's not like, I have readers who've read every word I've written. I can't say that about my family.
Sure. So as your education, work, and social world evolved from advertising to full-time writing, did you change how you related to people from your earlier life, and how did those shifts affect your relationships?
I don't think I was ever a very, overtly gregarious person. I've always been very kind of quiet and withdrawn. So I've had a few friends in various phases of my life. Some of them who continue to be my friends from school, from college, from my advertising years. And those people recognize me as the person that I am, that I became a writer and a fairly well-known one. It's just incidental to them, So I think those are the relationships I cherish in many ways, because they just know me as who I am and not this public persona that they see.
Yeah. But that's a true blessing, huh, Anita?
Yeah, I have a few. I wouldn't say I can actually count on one hand,
Yeah.
but
you
I'm happy at least I have
Yeah,
these.
Absolutely. So I have a quick rapid fire round for you. So what books are on your nightstand?
Right now, I have 3 books on my nightstand. One is Rahul Pandita's new book, Our Friends and Good Homes. I had read it as a manuscript, and so I'm now keen to see what it has become.
Yeah.
The other book that I'm reading is K. Sridhar's Ajita,
Okay.
which is again a very interesting book talking about the past and the present. And then I'm also rereading Hilary Mantel's Wolf Hall.
Can a great book be badly written? And can anything overcome bad prose?
No.
What are some ways that writers could be more involved with literacy?
I think writers need to get out and talk to young people. I think it's very important to do that because I've seen that personally when I speak to school and college students.
Yeah.
There is hunger in them. And that hunger is not often appeased by parents or teachers or peers. It has to come from somebody who they think has done something with their lives. And so you become not just a torchbearer, you also become like a friend when you're talking to them and kind of meeting them halfway.
Yeah.
So that adds to how overall literacy grows. And when I say literacy, it's not about, signing a name.
Yeah.
And talking truly of understanding what one is studying
Yeah.
and the world.
Yeah, I agree that it's important for growth. Who among today's writers, novelists, playwrights, critics, journalists do you especially admire?
Ian Rankin, whose body of work is amazing, and how with every book he continues to kind of raise the bar. And another author that I have always loved is Hilary Mantel. There's so many of them. I read so much, okay, but these two I would talk about.
Do you have any favorite genres that you avoid?
Okay, I don't have a favorite genre as such. I read everything except science fiction and fantasy.
Okay.
I don't read fantasy or science fiction. I don't mind watching a fantasy series or something like that, but I can't read it.
Not even Harry Potter?
Yeah, Harry Potter because my son forced me to read it, but not otherwise.
If you could require the president to read one book, what would it be?
The Constitution.
Okay. What's the one book you wish you had written?
Gosh, that's a tough one. I would think this is book written by a Canadian writer called Anne Michaels called Fugitive Pieces. That's a book, I don't know why it's prose read. She's a poet, so the prose reads like poetry. And it's just the scope of the book, all of it.
Do you prefer the short story to the novel?
No, I would definitely like to work on a novel. The short story just happens. It just happens.
Okay. If you could change 3 things about the publishing industry, what would they be?
If I could change 3 things, one would be to kind of have some kind of embargo on celebrity authors because they take away room, space, money, energy, everything from both the publishing house and the readers. The second one would be to kind of make books a little more inexpensive than they are. And the third thing would be to hopefully have, I worked with a few fantastic editors, but not all editors are fantastic in that sense. When I say fantastic, that they are people who resonate with new writing styles, new authors and stuff like that, who are willing to give new authors a chance. And very often the publishing industry is constrained by all the, the finances. So it means that there is more and more bad books being published and less good authors being published.
Yeah. Last question, and I'm really wanting to know your thoughts. What is feminism and what is it not?
Okay, so I do not really know the difference between early feminism, post modern, all of that. But what I do believe feminism should be about is about saying that I'm happy to be a woman, and I I do not, and yes, I know that there are a lot of problems that make women have to take an inferior position in life. But the solution to that isn't turning into a man hater or trying to be like a man. It's just about being comfortable as a woman and achieving the most you can as a woman. Because biologically, we are different. Men are different and women are different. So trying to be like a man is not going to help the woman in any way. But I would just believe that she should believe, every woman should believe that she is fine as who she is and make the most of everything that life has, dealt her. And not kind of allow herself to become a victim. Because sometimes, yes, circumstances force you into a position of becoming a victim. But again, going back to that thing, tomorrow's a new day. So get out of that.
Yes. Thank you very much, Anita, for your perspective and for this meaningful conversation. I truly enjoyed it.
Thank you, Neha.
That was Anita Nair. Her stories challenge, comfort, and confront in equal measure, urging us to look deeper and listen harder. It's a reminder that literature is not just written, it is lived. Thank you for tuning in to Expressions. Until next time, keep questioning, keep imagining, and keep returning to the power of a well-told story.